Hey, what's up, everybody?
And welcome back to Mile Higher Podcast episode. What are we on?
299.
Dude.
Almost 300.
That's crazy. Next week will be our 300th episode. Insane. Well, Josh is back today. Great news.
I'm back in full capacity. Voice has returned. I'm feeling great. Better than ever.
Sounding great, babe. Love
yes,
it.
I was very worried that I lost my voice forever. I started having thoughts.
Why were you worried about that?
I don't know. This has been a very weird illness that's just lingered for far too long. But I'm glad my voice is back. Yeah,
it was just a cough.
I don't know. It could just be in my head. Maybe all the cough syrup I was drinking was making me a little loopy. But because I was like, man, if I can't podcast anymore, what will I do with my life?
Yeah, what would you do? Well, anyway, we're here. I'm Kendall.
I'm Josh.
And we are joined by our producer, Janelle.
Hello.
Well, guys, today we have a lot to go over in today's episode. We are going to be taking a look at the troubled teen industry, which I'm sure a lot of you are somewhat familiar with. I'd always known that this type of thing exists, and it was mainly because I used to watch Dr. Phil growing up. I'd watch it sometimes after Ellen in my youth. And that's where I would hear about these camps. Obviously, it was portrayed on the show to be this amazing experience, changing lives. I didn't really become aware of how horrible these camps were, these programs, I should say, until later in life. I think the first time I was really introduced to it was when Paris Hilton put out her documentary, which was a YouTube Originals, right?
Yeah, it's called This Is Paris.
Yeah. We took a look at it again yesterday. Just had to remind myself, but it is truly insane what her experience was, but what so many others have gone through as well. And honestly, huge shout out to Paris for bringing this to a larger audience, because I think a lot more people have become aware of how horrific this industry really is.
Yeah, honestly, I really didn't have any idea just how bad it was.
No,
and
I could never have imagined.
I'd only really heard about like some of the boarding schools and like the boot camp through the army and stuff like that, scared straight programs.
Right, yeah.
But I had never heard of these like private, well-funded organizations that exist all over the place. I mean, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them. Some are no longer around due to just all the atrocities that have happened at some of these places. But it's a very, very dark rabbit hole to fall down. And I mean, you can just go on Reddit, go to the Troubled Teen Reddit, and you can just see story after story after story about, you know, a lot of these places that we're going to talk about today of individuals' experiences and you know, both very, very negative with a few positives mixed in. Because that's the real question here, is the idea behind these programs and camps inherently bad, or is it bad because of a few bad eggs or lack of oversight, regulation?
A lot of bad. You say eggs? Isn't it normally apples?
Yeah, either rotten eggs or bad apples.
Okay,
I think
that's fair. That's fair.
I guess apples, bad apples.
I'd say the majority is pretty rotten, though.
Yeah, definitely not great by any stretch of the imagination.
It's actually really horrible, and I would definitely issue a trigger warning here. This episode could be disturbing to some of you out there, especially. God, I'm sure at least one of you, probably several of you, have firsthand experience with these types of programs, whether you went yourself or you knew someone who went. But like I said, it's just so much worse than I ever could have actually imagined could really happen. And so broadly, there's just endless amounts of stories. And we're going to go over some specific stories.
But also look at the history. Like, how did we get to this point, and why? You know, what's the methods and tactics behind these programs, and where did they come from? And I one thing I really didn't know was that a lot of these tactics and the way that they run these programs go back to a cult.
Yeah.
Synanon. Which,
when you really think about it, isn't shocking, right?
No, not shocking, because it's a lot of the practices are very cult-like. So,
yeah.
But the fact that we're subjecting young children, teenagers, impressionable youth to this, who have already gone through trauma and all sorts of hardships, is beyond me, and I'm sure beyond all of us, because it just doesn't make any sense. Like, how are we actually helping these kids in these programs and how are we rehabilitating them to go back and rejoin society and, become a productive member? I think is a big question, which, this kind of lends to the issue with the prison system and the criminal justice system as a whole of prisons aren't really rehabilitating anybody. And the private prisons that run, are for profit and things like that. So it's, I don't know, it's a whole can of worms.
It's very similar. Yeah. And that's one thing to note too, is a lot of the kids who end up in these programs really, not that any child deserves, for sure, no child deserves to go through these programs, in my opinion. But like a lot of them didn't really have many behavioral issues, or like their lives were really on track and they were really excelling in school, weren't getting in trouble with the law, and they had, personal things going on. A lot of it's religion oriented.
Yeah, a lot of the camps are
going
religious
against the
in nature.
the norms of religion, or what's the word I'm looking for?
I can relate a lot to the kids that go to some of these Christian or religious organizations, because I think there's this inherent fear among religious parents, especially in Christianity, where if your kids start straying away from Christianity, and that's like one of the most important things to most Christian parents, is that their kids grow up in the faith and continue in the faith beyond, 18 years old. And so if your child is starting to stray from that path, or their lifestyle or their, sexuality doesn't line up with the parents' belief systems, then sometimes parents jump to extreme measures to try to correct them and put them back on the path to, in their minds, the path to God. But I don't know, doesn't seem like a very good idea by any means. And I can totally see why, these kids end up the way that they do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is a huge topic, by the way. Like we're doing a very condensed overview version of the troubled teen industry, and we could probably do a bunch of offshoot episodes into specific organizations and Synanon and all these various, even the celebrity stories. I mean, you could do a whole episode on. So this is going to give you a really good understanding of the troubled teen industry, where it came from, what's the current state of it, as well as some of the craziest stories out there from those that went through it.
So these programs were really popularized in the 1970s, and they're comprised of wilderness therapy camps, boot camps, residential treatment centers, therapeutic boarding schools, religion-based programs, and drug rehabilitation programs. And they have hundreds of locations all across the United States, and billions of dollars are funneled into these programs. The troubled teen industry has supporters in various presidents, celebrities, most notably Dr. Phil, who he himself has sent numerous kids to programs directly after filming for his show. And at any given time, there are between 120,000 and 200,000 children in troubled teen programs across the United States. And that's something to really keep in mind during this episode, is there are people who are suffering in these programs as we speak. And a lot of work has been done. There's still so much to do. And in recent years, like we said, celebrities have been speaking out, most notably Paris Hilton and also Bad Baby or Danielle Bregoli. And they have spoken out about these treatment centers that they attended as children. And they and many others have alleged abuse, kidnapping, cult-like tactics, and even murder. But these centers, of course, do have their defenders. For some youth, they credit them with changing their lives. The centers manipulate parents into not only signing over custody of their children, that's right, signing over custody of their children, but also convincing them that if their children speak out against the center, that they are lying. However, to understand the current state of these programs, we really need to take a look at the past.
Many think that the first troubled teen program was the Devereaux Foundation, founded in 1912 in Philadelphia. And what started as a boarding school for kids in need of special education grew into a nationwide foundation that offered services for drug rehabilitation, truancy, and behavioral issues. The Devereaux Foundation still exists, but its over 100-year history set the stage for troubled teen programs to come. After a child died while attending a Devereaux program in New York in 2022, a lawsuit uncovered evidence of sexual abuse, physical abuse bordering on torture, and emotional trauma dating back to the program's inception. That's really crazy and horrifying to think about. The 75-page lawsuit against Devereaux said, quote, "This pervasive culture of abuse allowed perpetrators access and opportunity to abuse highly vulnerable children and young adults and gave them impunity to act without the risk of detection." And as we'll see throughout this episode, almost all the allegations of abuse are handled internally within the program, which is obviously a huge issue. And the general public only knows when high-profile celebrities speak about their experience or when a child sadly dies. Between 1912 and 1958, at least 6 other programs started nationwide. Most of these programs were operated by religious groups and church organizations run by staff with little to no behavioral health experience before the program, literally plucked them off the streets. This tactic is still used today as staff at most troubled teen centers are former participants with complete faith in the program no matter how extreme the measures may be. In addition to them, the staff is also made up of complete newbies in the field of child psychology, who literally answered ads in newspapers and online. And get this, no background checks are completed before the person is hired, which has basically invited hundreds of opportunistic predators looking for access to vulnerable children. I bet a lot of parents who sign their kids up for these programs have no idea about that one. In April of 2023, 2 former participants of the Griffith Centers for Children drug rehabilitation program in Colorado Springs filed a lawsuit against the program, alleging that an unchecked female staff member gave them drugs in exchange for sex while they were minors. A former behavioral therapist who worked at Griffith, Deanna Cantwell, was told this by the victims, and she attempted to bring it up to HR. However, HR told her that the kids in the program were criminals and therefore liars. This is yet another tactic at many troubled teen programs where staff and parents are instructed to never believe the children in the program because they're all criminals, scumbags who can't be trusted. After bringing this up to the program for months, Deanna was fired. Griffith is still operating across Colorado and was founded in 1927 as one of the earliest troubled teen programs in the country. And I was curious. I did a little Google Maps search for this, and you can find, their listing, which the organization has changed a lot. But if you look at the reviews, you can tell there's a lot of personal experiences shared there in those 1-star reviews. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. By the 1950s, there was no general rubric for the newly founded troubled teen programs nationwide. And although they operated independently and were still generally awful to the young participants, they did not share many of the same tactics. That was until 1958 when a man by the name Charles E. Diedrich founded the self-help and recovery cult Synanon.
So Charles was born in rural Ohio in 1915, and by the time he graduated high school, Charles was already an alcoholic. He dropped out of college in his first semester and kept drinking. He got married, had children, then got divorced and remarried. And by the 1950s, his second wife begged him to join AA and get sober. The two of them still divorced, but Charles was finally able to get sober through the program, and he continued attending and quickly became one of the group's most popular speakers. Members described him as narcissistic, but magnetic, and soon people joined just to hear him speak. He started hosting informal meetings at his apartment and realized that he was becoming more popular than the AA meetings themselves. After Charles did an experiment at UCLA to see if LSD could help people get sober, he decided to create his own program to rival AA. In 1958, he founded Synanon, or Symposium Anonymous, in Southern California. Charles said that his tactics could get any addict clean, no matter how far he took things. The organization's main exercise was a group therapy session called the game or attack therapy. A member would be singled out and placed in the center of all of the other members. Then everyone in the group would start to berate the person in the middle. You could use slurs, you could swear, scream at them, whatever you wanted to do. And if the member tried to defend themselves, other members were encouraged to go even harder. Former members said that the game strips you of your ego and pride, and no matter how loud you scream, they can scream louder. Physical violence was the only thing that was off limits, at least in the beginning.
As you can imagine, this is incredibly damaging to people who have experienced this. There's studies out there that have looked at the effects of attack therapy, which, by the way, is not a form of therapy. That is recognized, I should say.
Yeah.
And those who have experienced it in this study had psychological damage that lasted for months. No surprise there. And it's horrible.
Yeah, can you imagine that?
No, it's horrible. I mean, the fact that people really looked at this as therapy is truly mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Imagine what that would be like to be just standing there and you're already dealing with X, Y, and Z issues. And then people are just screaming at you, offending. I can't even imagine the words they would come up. And then try to like one-up other people in the group by trying to say something even worse than the person said previously. Like, can you imagine how toxic and horrible that would get so quickly?
I just don't understand how this is supposed to help with your addiction.
It doesn't.
In what way? Other than like completely break your ego.
Yeah.
And like,
shame
I
you.
mean, I get that's what they're trying to do is like strip you of your ego and reduce you to nothing, I guess. But I don't really see the path forward after that. How does that affect your actual disease that you have?
No, it does not.
Like, it makes no sense.
It's the same argument that people will make with people who need to lose weight, that it's a good idea to make them feel horrible about themselves, shame them, and that they will fix whatever addiction they're dealing with. I mean, this type of thing has been applied to so many different areas over the years, and it does not work.
This episode's brought to you by Chomps. I love that we're sponsored by Chomps because I've been eating Chomps for years now, long before they've been a sponsor of the show. And I'm just such a big fan of their product because it is the best out there when it comes to a beef stick, or, I mean, they've got all sorts of different types of Chomps. I've eaten like beef jerky sticks for years and years and years, and I always felt really crummy after eating some of the other brands out there because they're packed with fillers and preservatives, and sometimes they just give you such bad indigestion. But when I eat Chomps, I feel empowered. I feel like I can do anything. I can conquer my day, and I can keep my stomach at bay because Chomps are that delicious with 0 sugar, up to 12 grams of protein, and they're low carb, which I absolutely love. Been trying to live that low carb life, try to limit the amount of carbs I'm eating, and Chomps just helps keep me from being hungry all the time because I'm a big guy. I love to eat, and Chomps is always there for me. Chomps comes in 3 types of meat, which I love: grass-fed and finished beef, venison, and antibiotic-free turkey, which all 3 are delicious. I've been especially loving the salt and pepper venison sticks, which it's a chef's kiss to whoever created those over at Chomps because they are absolutely delicious. I also love that Chomps is family owned and operated. Gotta love a family business. Support the family business over at Chomps. Chomp sticks come in 10 delicious, bold flavors, so there's a healthy snack option for everyone, or grab a variety pack to satisfy your whole family's taste buds. There are even smaller chomplings. With thousands of 5-star reviews, snackers around the world have satisfied their hunger cravings with Chomps. Even better, you can order online and have them delivered straight to your door. You can even subscribe for ongoing savings. And right now, Chomps is offering our listeners 20% off your first order and free shipping when you go to chomps.com/milehigher. Go to chomps.com/milehigher to see all of the delicious flavors and get 20% off your first order and free shipping. That's chomps.com/milehigher. And don't forget to use our link to let them know we sent you.
Synanon exploded in popularity with media coverage calling it the Little Miracle on the Beach. A Hollywood film was made about Synanon, and many celebrities joined, even if they weren't addicts. In fact, many non-addicts in general joined because they just wanted to be part of a community. Synanon became self-policed, and members were forced to snitch on others. All issues, criminal or otherwise, were, of course, handled internally. Synanon grew across the country, and troubled youth soon became the focus of the program. It started with children of adult members who were cordoned off from their parents into different facilities. Then juvenile courts sent children to Synanon facilities against the child's consent. The children's programs were even more restrictive than the adults, and they wouldn't be allowed food if they were on punishment. They couldn't speak for months at a time, and children as young as 4 were forced to participate in the game, which is what we mentioned earlier, the berating the person in the middle of the circle. And up until this point, violence was still the one thing that was off limits during these attack therapy sessions. In 1973, Charles poured a can of root beer over a woman's head during a session. And while violence is not the norm for adult participants, it soon became central to the youth program.
Children were beaten, sat on, and humiliated in front of the group. And if a child tried to walk away or not participate, they knew they would likely be next. Synanon also began using its Imperial Marines to kidnap children on their parents' behalf. Often the children had no prior knowledge and did not know why a stranger was all of a sudden in their room. Synanon was accused of child abuse and kidnapping by many former members, but the cult always avoided legal issues. Local police almost always sided with the cult and were co-signed by many politicians who protected the group from regulation. Honestly, we could do an entire episode on the Synanon cult, which we probably will at some point because there's just so much, but we'll kind of summarize some of the key points here. Synanon members had declared Charles as their god. He made all of the male members get vasectomies and even tried to kill lawyer Paul Morantz after he mailed him a rattlesnake. The snake bit Paul, but luckily he survived, so just absolutely bonkers. Their group lost its tax-exempt status in 1991 and quickly disbanded. However, it still lives on today through the troubled teen industry. Before Synanon closed down, they created 4 spin-off residential programs in the Elan School, Daytop Village, Sea-Doo, Phoenix House, and the Senecor Foundation. These were all Synanon-founded programs that used the same tactics through the 20th century and into the 2000s. However, many didn't even know of these programs' association with the cult as they presented themselves as an all-inclusive rehab facilities for at-risk youth. Even programs not associated with the cult modeled their tactics strictly off of Synanon. And as we'll see shortly, there's a pattern of kidnapping, attack therapy, brutal punishment, brainwashing, and internal policing that is central to most programs in the troubled teen industry. Synanon members describe the cult as, quote, organized chaos, a phrase that is still used in teen programs to this day. These programs also enjoy the same lack of oversight as Synanon, where most lawsuits are dismissed as parents sign over their children's rights to the program. If a program is closed down, it'll often just reopen a few months later under different names with new leadership, just as Synanon did through its spin-off programs. But the troubled teen industry really exploded in the 80s and 90s after President Ronald Reagan endorsed numerous abusive teen programs as part of the DARE program. When George W. Bush was governor of Texas, he removed legislation so that teen programs could operate without scrutiny and continue to support them into his presidency. The industry again saw another explosion in popularity after Dr. Phil sent vulnerable children straight to teen programs from the set of his show. Parents worried about their children's well-being would see this happen on the show and do the same for their children, which we'll discuss the celebrity ties to the industry further towards the end of today's episode. But first, it's important to understand what the process of joining one of these programs actually looks like. Obviously, every child's experience within the troubled teen industry starts where? With their parents. This is the really difficult part about all this, because I think it's very easy to be like, this is the parents' fault, right? For putting them into these programs where all this horrible stuff's happening to them. But I don't think anybody can really judge any parents out there, because until you've been in that situation, you don't know what you would do, right?
I judge.
You do?
Not all of them. I think it's a case-by-case basis.
But like, yeah, obviously there's bad parents out there who, you know, didn't do a great, like, I think there's a lot of parents out there that didn't do a great job early on with their children. So, you know, you look at why they're even in this position in the first place. It's because likely their parents were absent. Something else happened where, you know, they didn't get the children and get the things that they needed from their parents. And so by the time they get into, you know, their teenage years, when, you know, kids are becoming very independent and they start, you know, going through hard times, or maybe there's childhood trauma that they're still dealing with, or a lot of cases, heavy drug use happens, kids fall in with the wrong crowds, that they aren't equipped with, you know, the right knowledge to deal with their children at that point. So, you know, they start doing research. You know, maybe some parents have exhausted all other options on their own. Some parents, for example, like in Paris Hilton's case, where they have a lot of money and they want to pay somebody to try and fix these issues for them.
Let someone else deal with it.
And so they go online, or, you know, start looking at the brochures out there. And from the brochures for these treatment programs or residential therapy camps, or you know, some of these other organizations, it looks like, oh, okay, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, if I send my child there and pay all this money, then, you know, this is going to turn them around. This is going to save their life. And, you know, that's kind of how a lot of children end up, you know, at a lot of these places, is for that reason.
For sure. I think in a lot of cases, I do think there's a lot of cases as well where parents may not have had some other issue going on in their own life, whether they're struggling from addiction or, you know, whatever it is, which is a different conversation, obviously. They're struggling as well. But there are cases of parents who just aren't there for their children emotionally because they don't want to take the time to be a parent, whether
Right.
they're too obsessed with their careers or whatever it is, or they're blinded by things that they're hearing in the church. They want to control their child, every single aspect of their life and their personality and who they are. They don't accept them. They don't listen to them. They've traumatized them and they've made them the way they are because of their own selfish actions. So I think, yes, it's very case by case.
It's a wide spectrum
Yes.
of different situations.
Like, I don't blame every single parent who puts their children in one of these. And I think a lot of them did not understand what they were actually doing. But I think there are a lot of parents who perfectly well understood and knew exactly what they were getting their kid into and just did it because, yeah, it's out of fear. But sometimes I don't think that fear is justified. Sometimes.
Sure. Well, do you think that the marketing that these camps do was perhaps a bit false? You know,
Yeah,
when
a
you look
bit.
when you look at when you go to like Turnabout Ranch's website and you look at the homepage, you're like, oh, all right, they're gonna send my kid out to a ranch. They're gonna do manual labor. They're gonna take care of animals. They're gonna be pulled away from technology and all their friends and kind of out of their element and gonna have this whole new
It's like summer camp
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the parents become brainwashed by these programs because they are desperate for their kids to get help. And these programs, like Josh said, advertise themselves as these great structured, programs you can send them to, and they do all these wonderful things. And I think the big thing is they advertise, oh, well, we have doctors, we have counselors here.
Yeah.
And,
Experts.
you want to be able to just trust these medical experts that are there. And you would probably think like, oh, well, if there's doctors and counselors there, then they are going to have my kid's best interest at mind. And so, I would trust that whatever they're doing is going to be effective. And so I think there is a level of, responsibility that the parent needs to take. But I do think that there's also a level of brainwashing that these organizations do to the parents.
Yeah.
And I guess like I get what you mean, kind of like, yeah, I think it's their fault. And like I said, I agree to some extent, but I also can kind of see how, unless you are a parent in that situation, you have a kid that is, going down the wrong path and maybe they're at jeopardy for going to jail or committing a horrible crime or, being a victim of a horrible crime. Until you're in that situation and you've exhausted all these other avenues and none of them seem to be working, I can see how you would be desperate to do anything at that point to try and save your kid before it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah. I certainly have sympathy. I think a lot of the parents are victims as well. I just don't think you can say that about all of them.
No, definitely
No, I think,
not.
well, I think a lot of the kids that end up there are just because their parents don't agree with the way that they've chosen to live their life, right? And they may have never done drugs ever before, and they're good kids and they're good students, and it's a religious thing. Like a lot of these camps are religious in nature. So if a parent feels like they're losing their child, in the fight for their soul, and a lot of parents feel that way, where it's like, my child in their eyes is going down a dark path. They're doing things that doesn't line up with your belief system. That can be a very scary thing for a parent. And I think a lot of parents and religious parents, you could argue, are brainwashed to some extent by their own beliefs and think that they truly do believe in these things. So they're like, I will do anything to try to correct my child's path for, to keep them from potentially, losing their soul to the devil. I know it sounds probably really extreme and really crazy, but I can relate to that analogy a lot, because there are a lot of parents like that who are like, well, I'll send you to this camp where you'll be basically forced into submission, into believing the truth, right? And seeing the truth again. And we need to get you away from those external influences, aka your friends at school. A lot of Christian kids that go to public schools, a lot of their parents have issues with that because of the influences that their kids are under at those schools. And maybe they can't afford to send their kids to private Christian schools. And so, they resort to these camps, or
Well, these camps are extremely expensive.
I mean, not all of them are super expensive like that. The one that we'll be talking about, New Horizons, is definitely expensive, but there's a lot of like camps, maybe not onto the level of some of these out there that parents send their kids to.
Yeah, but none of them are free.
No, they're not free for sure. They cost money, but if you thought that you were going to save your kid's soul, would you do it?
I mean, see, I have to try to understand from that lens because obviously I am not a religious person. I've never been a religious person. So I have to try to find that understanding and sympathy for people who truly believe that their child could end up in hell and be tortured for the rest of eternity. And if I really believed that, I guess that fear would drive you to do extreme things to try and protect them. So I get it. I do. In some cases, I don't know. It's really tough.
And in the moment, I think a lot of these parents believe truly that they're doing the right thing, that they're doing what God wants them to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so can you fault them for following their belief system to that place? Obviously, it comes at the expense of their child, where their child maybe doesn't share the same beliefs and their rights are being taken and they're being forced to, go down a path they're not interested in. But from the parents' perspective, they truly believe they're doing what's best for their child. And I think that's a very difficult debate because it's like, when you are a child and, according to the Bible and stuff, like you're supposed to obey your father and your mother and your parents. And so
it's just hard because it's like, from that logic, are you justifying parents that send their children to conversion therapy because they think that it's saving them from a life?
Yeah, I mean, that would be the argument, is that
eternity of torture.
Exactly. That would be their argument, is that
I just can't.
I know.
Can't understand.
I know.
It,
it's
so.
hard to understand, but I think those of you out there who have grown up in very religious homes like this will understand that
Mm-hmm.
And even looking back in hindsight, it's like it's hard to fault your parents for just believing what they believed. I mean, it's sometimes like, oh man, I thought you were smarter than that. But it's like, that's what they believe. That's what they grew up in. That's what they've been conditioned to believe. So it's like, how much fault can you truly give them? But then there's other parents like Paris Hilton's parents, where it's like they're absent, right? Or there's other internal family issues, or they don't have time or the care or want to actually be a parent to their child because they're too busy or whatever it is.
And it's more like, protect our public image. You're not making us look good.
That's truly fucked up. That's that's just like evil, because it's you're just not doing your job, right, as a parent. Let's talk about Paris Hilton's experience with the troubled teen industry a bit. So Paris Hilton was sent to Provo Canyon, a program within CEDU, when she was 16. Her parents were convinced she had fallen into a lifestyle of drugs, of course, once the family moved to New York. In reality, she had just made more friends and started going to house parties, which is pretty normal for teenage stuff.
Very normal.
A lot of parents don't get that, though. You'd be surprised at how many parents don't understand, because either they didn't do it as a teen, or they had very negative experiences as a teen, so they don't want their kids to also go through that.
Yeah.
But that was my upbringing. It was like, no parties. Like, I was not allowed to go to any parties, especially at night.
So when we would go to parties in high school, your parents just, they didn't know. You didn't tell them.
No, I literally lied
my
my way through my high school years.
You used to tell them that you were at
24-hour fitness playing basketball.
Wow. 24 hours.
I was like, they can't. That's not technically lying. I could be balling at 3 a.m. for all they know.
Wait, they believe
yes,
that?
Yes.
So you'd be like, yeah, my Friday night is consisting of going to 24 hours.
For 7 hours.
I'd be like, yeah, all my
You'd
friends
be
are
with
meeting
me.
up there. We just play pickup games all night. So I don't know what time I'll be home, but no, I was at her house.
So you didn't have a curfew though?
No, I did have a curfew, but I would
You'd sneak
I
in
would
and
just
stuff.
be late. I would just go past my curfew and I would lie, be like, oh, I played a couple extra games at 24-hour.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mom. And she'd be like, oh, okay, that's great that you're playing
I
basketball.
was playing with someone from church, and she'd be like, oh.
Meanwhile, I was playing with something else, if you know what I mean. But
okay, moving on.
hanging out with my high school sweetheart over here, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay.
Actually, I'm not totally lying, though. I played basketball with you as well.
We did?
Yeah.
I played
I
basketball.
would love to see Kendall
I
play
did not.
basketball.
Yeah, we did play a little basketball together.
Oh, that one night, yeah.
Yeah.
The night we met.
Yep.
Yep. That was the one and only time.
No, we would go to down the park in your neighborhood sometimes and shoot hoops and.
What?
I don't
would
really
really
remember
like to
that.
see this.
Anyways, the common denominator between most of these kids is that the parents become fearful of typical teenage behavior like sneaking out, partying, and being defiant. God, how many times did you guys ever hear from your parents like, stop being defiant?
No, because
You are
never.
being defiant. Are you serious?
I was
wasn't
never defiant.
Mm-mm. I was a big rule follower. My parents didn't really have rules for me, but they didn't need to.
Dude.
Yeah. I never broke
The
rules
amount of
because I'm scared. So
The amount of times that I was told I was being defiant, I could,
Defiant.
be like, you are being defiant.
No, I got in trouble. I definitely got yelled at and stuff, but never defiant.
It's another word for being like, you're being rebellious. Like you're
so
you're
not
rebelling
that.
against your parents.
I think my parents were
defying
like,
our
why
wishes."
don't you rebel? You're weird.
Why aren't you
Literally.
rebelling?
Go somewhere. Leave the house.
Early.
God.
Did you like go TPing and stuff, Josh?
I did do a lot of that.
I did. If I did,
I
I
was a
would do it in
vandalizer.
other neighborhoods. I wouldn't do it in my neighborhood because
Lucky.
all the houses were super spread out, so it'd
Oh,
be
yeah,
really
you
easy to get
can-
caught. But
Janelle, you've never gone TPing, huh?
Literally never went, and now
Hey,
I'm 29.
it's
I think
not
it's
too late.
I think it's too late
Well, you have like 2 months before you're 30, so now's the time.
to
Let's
go TPing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go TPing.
I would love to go TPing.
So fun. I've got all the tricks.
I'm just so pissed. I never experienced that. I never went to a party in high school either.
What?
Nope, never.
Wow. Even I went to parties.
I was really cool. Never
What
snuck
did you
out.
do?
Never snuck out.
sleep.
She's like,
It's like the truth.
No, this is what I did.
You sleep through all of high school.
Kendall knows this. Me and my friends would drive around. This is so stupid. We would drive around, and I didn't really do this, but I was like in the car laughing when they would do it, and they'd pull over, and we'd drive around with the tool. I remember this with a toolkit, and we would like. We would unscrew stop signs and like street signs and steal them and then like bring them back to her house.
Badass.
So stupid.
She was a delinquent.
Defiant.
Yeah, that's defiant.
I think like the
Rebellious.
worst I did was me and my friends would pull up to a liquor store, and my friends looked way older than they were, and we would like ask randos to buy us liquor, which is very dangerous and stupid.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, yeah, okay, and then we go back to her house and just like drink it. But we never like I didn't go to parties because I was terrified of getting MIPs. So I was a real
too,
winner.
yeah.
And then I would take naps in my car.
Hey,
yeah.
you were a winner. Look at you. Winning. Anyway.
Okay.
I can imagine everybody out there through your teenage years did something
Of course.
that would be classified as defiant behavior that your parents might consider bad enough to send you to one of these camps or programs, or repeated offenses. I know I was there. I was very close to probably going to one of these places, quite honestly.
Really?
I was bad, man. But I was a good kid, but a bad kid at the same time. To the normal people, I'm like an angel. I'm like a golden child. I was a great student. I was a, varsity basketball player. I, was in college in my senior year. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but no, I mean, when I wasn't doing that, I was a demon at church. Let me tell you,
Oh, yeah, at church.
you did
demon. Wreak havoc.
I was a demon at church. Sometimes I do feel bad for the things that I did to my church, because it got to a point where they literally kicked us out. They were like, you cannot bring
And your parents were humiliated.
these people back to our church. Seriously, this is like true story. My brother and I literally got kicked out of our church.
Iconic.
Lots of stories there. But anyways, when parents reach out to these programs, it's their last hope. So it's usually they feel like if they don't do this, then
Mm-hmm.
they may lose their child altogether. So let's talk about Emma Burris and her experience at Teen Challenge.
So Emma Burris was on her school's track team. She played volleyball. She also played soccer. And in 2011, she was sent to Teen Challenge, a religious program out of Texas. She was adopted at 7, and her parents were highly involved in their church. Despite being such a highly achieving student, Emma also expressed her sexuality, and her parents punished her for it. She lost her virginity to an older boy, and her parents caught her reading romance novels lit by only the streetlight outside of her window. David, who was a high school senior in Greeley, Colorado, was sent to New Horizons Youth Ministry in the Dominican Republic after his religious parents found out that he was gay. He had a 4.3 GPA and had hoped to receive scholarships and attend college. However, his involvement with this program stained his record, and he could not get scholarships once he was released. You can learn more about David's story from the documentary Gay and Evangelical. I highly recommend it. It is really very upsetting, but very eye-opening. It's
on YouTube too for free. So
the full title is Gay and Evangelical: Troubled Teens at Christian Reform Camps, U.S. Religion Documentary. So after parents contacted these programs, they would repeatedly say, quote, "Your child is going to lie to you, manipulate you, and try to get you to let them leave. And because parents already believe their child is lost, they take these as the only true words." One parent said they do such a good job of warping your view that you don't even see it as abusive. She said, quote, "It was manipulative, well orchestrated, and a hurtful project that they put us through." Next comes payment, of course. New Horizons, the program that David was sent to in the Dominican Republic, costs $72,000 annually. Most programs that are still operating today cost $7,000 a week, which is how much a year? What is 7 times 52?
$364,000.
Oh my God.
That's insane.
My God. Okay. And just to note on that, teens are normally forced to stay in these programs for like 18 months. So it could be well over that. The next step is transport. This is insane, but most of these programs are operated from far from where the child is living, either in another state or a rural part of their home state or even another country in some cases. And so children do not know where they're about to be moved to somewhere else for almost 2 years. And the programs encourage parents to not tell their children where they're going. They told parents that children were already bad and would resist going by any means necessary. So then, in the middle of the night, 2 muscular men in all black would show up at the children's bedroom and ask them the same question. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. Paris Hilton was woken up at 4:30 in the morning by 2 men in all black. She had no idea who they were, where they were taking her, or if they were going to kill her. Just imagine what that would be like and the trauma, PTSD that you get after that.
Yeah, that's scary. It reminds me of the way that McCamey Manor starts.
Yeah.
Like where they
Mm-hmm.
pick you up randomly by bounding you and binding you up and throwing you in the back of a van and driving you to the manor.
And see, I know that parents, I know that they think they're doing what's best for their child and they're told that this is the only way to get them to go, that there is no other way. You have to do it our way. But I struggle to understand and find sympathy for any parent who thinks, how can you end up thinking that?
Well, how's that going to fix your relationship with your kid?
I know.
Your kid's never going to trust you.
You're allowing someone to come in and fake kidnap them?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
No, God, it's horrible.
Well, what do they do if your kid refuses to go? Like, it's interesting because I looked at the Turnabout Ranch's website and it seems like most parents never even step foot on the property. They give you the option of like dropping your kid off to like at the camp and then seeing the facility, but they're like, most parents don't do that. And they have a transport. That's hard for me to
get sympathy for too. How can you send your child somewhere that you have never been?
Yeah. You've only seen pictures on the website?
I'm trying really hard not to judge because I know I've never been in this situation.
But what if your kid is like running away and if they catch wind that they're going to be leaving for this camp the next day and they take off and now they're missing and something happens to them? I mean, I agree. Kidnapping them, definitely not a good option.
There's got to be a better
way. But it's
way.
like, what else is there?
I don't know.
How do you get them there?
John's best friend in high school, this happened to him. He was sleeping. He was living with his grandma at the time, and he was sleeping in his bed. And then 2 people came in. His grandma knew that was happening, obviously. And 2 people came in at like 4 a.m. and literally just were like, literally grabbed him, pulled him out of his bed, threw him in the car, drove off. I think it was somewhere in Utah. And he was gone for months and months. Like, John was like, where the hell did this guy go? Like, where's my friend? And no one knew where he went. And then he came back and was telling us how he's like, oh yeah, I didn't shower for months. I was sleeping outside in the wilderness for months. Like, and I'm just like, how is that productive whatsoever.
And I wonder in some cases if you, like, I know we're about to talk about Emma Burris and her parents watched, and I'm sure many parents are watching this happen. You see your parents clearly approving this happen, but are there cases where you don't actually know if you've been kidnapped or not, that you are taken somewhere,
Yes,
and then
there
you're
are.
wondering, like,
Yes.
do my parents know I'm here?
Yes.
Jesus. Anyway, so Emma Burris, she resisted when transport agents showed up at her room at 3 a.m. She had no idea who they could be. Of course she's going to resist, like anyone would. They forced her to get dressed, zip-tied her hands together. And when agents took her to the van, her parents just stood there in the driveway and watched in silence. The trauma you would have from that, can't even imagine. When David was transported, he was woken up in the middle of the night, given 5 minutes to pack, and told he was going to another country. When he asked for how long, they wouldn't even say. For other kids who resisted transport to New Horizons in the Dominican Republic, transport agents zip-tied their hands, tied a belt around their waist, dragged them on the ground to their van, then dragged them across the airport before a multi-hour flight, which I still can't understand how that happens. Aren't people looking TSA like this?
They have the paperwork, though. That's the thing, is the parents signed over custody of the child, so they have the paperwork backing it up if anybody asks questions.
Signed over custody.
Yeah, David was one of those that was being dragged with a belt all the way to the Dominican Republic.
And at this point, they're not even told, which country they're even going to. Paris Hilton says that she still has PTSD dreams every night where strange people in all black kidnap her.
I have horrible insomnia. I'm scared to go to bed at night. I always have this recurring nightmare, no matter what I do. I'm in bed, and these two people come into my room. And say, do you want this to happen the easy way or the hard way? I'm trying to just run. I was just a kid living in New York, going to high school. Obviously ditching a lot of class, whatever, but I feel like my parents were scared and they didn't want their reputations to be ruined, because Page Six was writing all these stories. So I felt like I was just kind of just sent away to be hidden.
I think that's the case for a lot of parents, not even just, celebrities, but parents who don't want to be judged by their community, that they're worried their kids are embarrassing them.
Yeah.
So the next step is universal across every program. And again, these programs maintained that every child that was sent to one of these programs was a degenerate. They had already convinced their parents that their child was addicted to drugs, even though most of the participants dealt with minor behavioral problems. And the vast majority had pretty standard amount, of exposure to drugs and alcohol. Still, their parents thought their child was hiding something, and the untrained staff was also convinced. When the child finally arrived at the compound, all of them were forced to strip naked in front of strangers, bend over, and cough to ensure that they weren't hiding drugs. And obviously, this is a disgusting practice. Not only were there minors getting naked in front of complete strangers, mostly male strangers to add, but staff who conducted this full-body search were completely untrained. As the lawsuits against Griffith and other residential programs have proved, the vetting process is so low that many predators get to have access to these children. And this really shows how evil these programs are. By embarrassing and traumatizing the child, they become easier to manipulate and believe that these programs help them. After the child was stripped and led to their quarters, they were paired up with other kids. Mostly these were kids who, had already been in the program for many months or even years at that point and had been manipulated into believing that this was good for them and helping them. And Emma was strip searched and finally told that she would be with Teen Challenge for 15 months. She was then led into a room which she shared with her, quote, big sisters. This room had no doors, and there are floodlights in the hallways that are always on. If someone tried to open a window or enter the hallway after curfew, they were detained and put into solitary confinement. For her first 6 weeks at Teen Challenge, Emma was not allowed to speak and could not enter or exit a room unless accompanied by one of her big sisters. Room searches were conducted every morning at New Horizons in the Dominican Republic. Your room had to be spotless. Nothing could be inside your backpack, and your bed had to be made to specific, perfect, standards. And if one corner was untucked or your toothbrush was even slightly askew in your cabinet, you would be demoted, and that item would be thrown across the room. They actually show an example of this in that documentary I mentioned earlier. We'll have that linked below, but you can watch as they're doing this. It's just totally insane. It's very military. They literally make sure the bed sheet has exactly the right amount of, it's so stupid. I cannot understand it.
Yeah, it's definitely paramilitary.
Yeah.
It happens, I think, to everybody who goes through boot camp, and same for anybody who goes through law enforcement academy. They do the same type of thing.
Which is different because they're volunteering to be there.
Right. They're there on their own accord. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not forced to be there.
Mm-mm.
Participants were placed on a level system at New Horizons and many other residential programs. So if you're at a higher level, you'd become an older sibling to the younger ones. You'd work with the staff and even give out punishment along with them. If you're at a level 0, though, you're basically treated like a 6-year-old. You couldn't speak unless spoken to. You couldn't eat unless given permission. And you had to be with an older sibling constantly. Level 0s were also given harsher punishments. When one level 0 at New Horizons asked if they could eat and were ignored, they were forced to do 5 chin-ups at the dining table in front of everyone else. The punishment system varied from program to program, but almost all used physical abuse, mental abuse, torture, and solitary confinement. At New Horizons, punishments would be most severe for those who suffered panic attacks in front of other participants. Punishments would be sets of 6, which basically means 6 paddles on the butt or back, 6 reps of push-ups, 6 hours of manual labor, 6-mile runs, or 6 days in the quiet room. Even participants with leg amputations were forced to go on these runs, which is crazy. And you're probably wondering what the quiet room was. Well, the quiet room was a windowless shack on the New Horizons property. Punished children were given a mattress pad, a roll of toilet paper, and no toilet, maybe a bucket. Sometimes a stay in the quiet room would last a week, but some were left alone for months, which is just absolutely traumatizing and horrible torture, basically. At Provo Canyon, participants were bound with zip ties and locked in dog cages. Paris Hilton herself was strangled, hit, and monitored every time she took a shower or went to the bathroom by staff. There was also medical abuses. Again, it's important to note that very few staff members were trained doctors. Most were hired through a newspaper ad or were past participants even. Staff would take Paris Hilton and the other girls randomly every few weeks for a, quote, cervical exam. Again, this was not performed by any real doctor, so what the hell is that?
So invasive, so traumatic, also really painful.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what that would be like from someone who has no idea what the fuck they're doing and maybe getting some type of sick satisfaction out of it.
Yeah, who knows? It could be a complete predator that's doing this.
Yeah, probably happened quite a bit.
Emma Burris, who was at Teen Challenge, found out she was pregnant less than a month into the program. She couldn't tell anyone to check on her because she wasn't allowed to speak for her first 6 weeks.
It's
Unbelievable. The program agreed to carry her baby to term while she completed the program, but she had to give the child up for adoption. Emma herself was in the foster care system and wanted her child to avoid what she had went through before adoption. The staff never budged, though. Emma's parents had unconditionally signed away her custody over to Teen Challenge, and so it was their choice with what happened to the baby.
It was basically their baby.
When Emma was 8 months pregnant, she was forced to participate in gym class. She expressed discomfort and asked the staff if she could rest because she's pregnant. They said she could, but she had to remain in bed for the rest of the day, and they would add another day to her stay at the program. So Emma remained in gym class. That night, Emma and her friends watched a movie, and one of her friends noticed that Emma was staining the couch with blood. She told the staff that Emma needed medical attention, and they told her to stop talking or else she would be placed on punishment for just reporting potentially a major medical emergency. Emma was forced to sit on the floor so she wouldn't further stain the couch. The following day, Emma was diagnosed with severe gestational hypertension. and was given medication to induce labor. Emma did not have the energy to deliver the baby after months of undernourishment and constant physical activity, so she was given a C-section, and her baby was born. She was allowed to have 2 days with her child per Florida law before it was placed in the foster care system. And she said, quote, "I don't even want to say that motherly bond was there because I don't really know what that is. It is an estranged love. I felt unworthy, like I was loving someone who wasn't mine to love."
That is
it's heartbreaking to hear. After she returned to the Teen Challenge, Emma was forced to sleep on the couch, and other participants were not allowed to speak with her. Staff told her friends, quote, "If we see a mouth moving, you just broke a rule." Emma would cry every night asking for her baby. A few days after she returned, the staff informed her that she would have to start her 15-month stay over again. And at that point, she had already been at Teen Challenge for 9 months.
And was, participating in the gym class because she didn't want to add an extra day.
Yeah.
All for nothing.
Right.
You have to start over. Oh, it's just so upsetting thinking about what that recovery would be like, sleeping on a couch, postpartum.
Yeah. And your mental health.
Yeah. And her mental health throughout the whole pregnancy. It's probably, I'm not a doctor, but I imagine, hypertension is high blood
Elevated
pressure.
blood pressure.
So it's probably due to the stress. And oh my God, that story is just, I feel so deeply for her. It's so incredibly, incredibly heartbreaking. So depending on the program, almost all participants were forced to take medication, even if they had never been diagnosed with a condition. The medication was seemingly given out at random. One anonymous participant said that they were given such high dosages that the first psychiatrist they ever saw leaving the program said that they were surprised they hadn't died. As previously mentioned, linguistic control is central to these programs. Participants were forced to always speak positively about the program, which is another reason that parents felt reassured when they, would be able to talk to their kid every once in a while when they were allowed to call home. Staff monitored every word, every phone call, every diary entry. One anonymous participant said that she kept a diary in another language. And when she entered the program manager's office, she found her translated diary entries saved on his computer. Many participants had their rights stripped away based on sexuality. Queer participants were put on, quote, relationship punishments with their peers, in which everyone would have to pretend that they were dead, or else they would face punishment themselves. Trans and non-binary participants were forced to drop their pronouns, go by dead names, and dress according to their assigned gender. The dress code was also insane, with many girls forced to wear extremely short skirts and flip-flops, which made it harder to run away. Counselors and therapists at the center also pushed dangerous lies about sexuality to participants, stating that if a member of the same sex expressed affection towards you, they were grooming you. David was told at New Horizons that his sexuality was based on prior trauma with the opposite sex, and that they would force him to have contact with them through attack therapy. And participants were not protected from other, more dangerous children. At Bad Babies program, a student killed 2 staff members while trying to escape. Students were exposed to so much trauma while at these programs that many ran away. Daniel Yen was one of hundreds of kids that ran away or went missing while attending CEDU programs, the Synanon spinoff. He went missing 10 days after he first arrived at the program, and 20 years later, Daniel is still missing. But of course, aside from punishments, abuse, sexual assault, medical malpractice, kidnapping, and a million other crimes against humanity, every child participated in attack therapy, an evolution to Synanon's game. Like in Synanon, a participant would be singled out and berated. Peers and staff would call them slurs, throw things at them, subject them to physical abuse in front of the group, and much worse. During times when participants were forced to tell stories of sexual trauma, staff would force the victim to act out the incident again and again with either another participant or adult staff. Yes, you heard that right. They were forced to reenact these acts of sexual violence constantly, with group therapy sessions that sometimes lasted 3 days. Many gay participants said that they were forced to act out mock sexual contact with members of the opposite sex in an attempt to convert them. This is surprising because outside of therapy, co-ed contact was limited. Emma wasn't even allowed to look at boys when they sat in the same room for church services. Directors and managers repeatedly described this form of therapy as, quote, organized chaos, which is exactly how Synanon described their tactics. When parents finally found out about the horrors that their children had endured, Many panicked and tried to get them out, but leaving, even with parental consent, is nearly impossible. Parents sign away all their children's rights to the program at the beginning of their stay. This has also, as you can imagine, made lawsuits against the programs very difficult, as the program's word holds more weight, legal weight, than the participants. Government oversight is handled state by state, and most programs operate without legal authority to answer. Even when a kid turned 18, they would be manipulated to stay in the program. Many programs allow children to leave once they reach adulthood, but still, they're not given their phone, wallet, medication, or any personal effects until they have finished their time in the program. David turned 18 while he was at New Horizons in the Dominican Republic. His parents wanted him to stay, and all his other friends and family had no idea where he was. Eventually, he was able to sneak a letter through a documentarian to his best friend in Greeley, and his neighbors flew out to the Dominican Republic. And once they arrived, staff told them repeatedly that he wasn't there and they couldn't see him. The neighbors and friends got lawyers involved, and almost a year later, David did finally return home.
However, many parents and participants are not only manipulated into believing the program works, they make it their whole life. After Emma gave up her baby, she stayed at Teen Challenge for an additional 15 months. And when she graduated, she joined a Teen Challenge church, married another graduate participant, and tried to become a counselor. At 19, she got pregnant again, but this time she wanted to have an abortion. Her Teen Challenge community manipulated her into having the child, and afterwards she spiraled into a deep depression. She even attempted suicide and even tried to join an adult version of Teen Challenge but couldn't afford the program. Finally, a friend convinced her to leave her husband, move into her apartment, and exit the Teen Challenge cult. After she had done this, she finally felt her life turn around. She said that she was surrounded by love for the first time in her life. She still writes letters to her first child, hoping she can one day read them to him. Thankfully, some of the programs we've named in this episode have closed, but hundreds of teen residential programs exist across the nation right now. When a program is closed, it will often open again a few months later with a new name and new management. And things are improving. Utah became one of the first states to enact oversight over teen residential programs. This has been thanks to Unsilenced, a fantastic organization focused on spreading the stories of survivors, lobbying for state legislation, and keeping a directory of abusive residential programs. But still, the industry is thriving in the United States largely thanks to its celebrity ties, which have been central to it since the very beginning. Celebrity ties to the troubled teen industry also originate with Synanon. After the highly positive Hollywood film about the cult was released in 1965, there were dozens of celebrities that began hanging out at various seminars and group gatherings. Celebrities like Leonard Nimoy, Jane Fonda, Charlton Heston, and Lucille Ball were the high-profile celebs who had co-signed the cult then. And of course, after the whole attempted murder with a rattlesnake thing, celebrity ties to Synanon were far less prevalent. Still, it set the stage for celebrities to be involved with the troubled teen industry that came after. Marie Osmond sent multiple children to residential programs. Even Barbara Walters sent her daughter to CEDU, where she was so programmed by the center that she started her own. Rosie O'Donnell's daughter cut off contact with her after she attended a Utah program. Roseanne Barr kept her children at CEDU programs for most of their teenage years. And Clint Eastwood sent his children to CEDU programs, but has kept a relatively low profile about their experience, because I'm sure there's some bad experiences there as well.
Are you a lazy person who doesn't want to pick out your own clothes? Maybe you're like me, a lazy person who could care less about fashion. However, I am on camera for a living, and sometimes I have other events where I've got to, I can't wear my pajamas everywhere, right? So that's why I love Stitch Fix so much, because they help me curate my wardrobe and I don't have to do any of the work. That's one thing I really love about Stitch Fix. I always rave about how I don't have to go physically shopping anymore because I hate going to the mall. I hate dressing rooms. I really don't have that great of a sense of fashion. So Stitch Fix really hooks me up. My stylist helps me take my wardrobe to the next level. She knows what works for me, and sometimes she knows even better than I do myself, and it's like having a stylish best friend shopping for me. And you know that confidence boost you get when you put on a really amazing outfit? That's what I get from Stitch Fix, because when I look good, I feel good, and that just shows. And it couldn't be easier to do, friends. All you have to do is give your stylist your size, your style, your budget preferences, and you order a box when you want and how you want. There's no subscription required. Like for me personally, I like to get my boxes every 3 weeks, but sometimes I put them on pause. I also love that I can let them know if I have a specific event coming up or I want a certain color. Maybe this month I just want tops. Whatever it is, it's truly customizable. My stylist sends me personalized pieces and the fit is always flawless. It's like they're reading my mind, and I swear the longer you do it, the better they're gonna get to know you, and it's gonna be the most custom experience possible. And Stitch Fix makes it easy because if you don't love something, you just send it back, and shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. They send you a prepaid bag that you stuff everything in and stick it in your mailbox. It really could not be easier. For a style that makes you feel as good as you look, get started today at stitchfix.com/milehigher and get $20 off your first fix. That's stitchfix.com/milehigher for $20 off. Once again, stitchfix.com/milehigher, must redeem within 7 days of sign up. Of course, political ties to the industry have proved to be the most important. When Synanon was operating, police and local politicians almost always let them operate with a blank check, and consequences for abuse were handled internally until the program was shut down in the early 90s. However, in the late 1980s, the troubled teen industry really exploded in popularity, supported mainly by Ronald and Nancy Reagan. The Reagan supported several teen programs nationwide as part of the DARE program. Many of you are probably pretty familiar with that. They stripped federal legislation to allow almost no federal oversight of the programs and financially contributed to many centers. Most notably, the Reagan supported Straight Inc., which two parents founded after their son attended a Synanon program called The Seed, which soon spread to 43 locations across the United States. Nancy Reagan visited multiple Straight Inc. locations throughout the 80s and made numerous television appearances publicly praising these programs. Here's a clip of her visiting a straight program in Virginia. The episode was titled A Pilgrimage of Hope.
I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of what you're trying to do with your lives and turn your lives around. And I know it takes a lot of courage. But there's a great, big, wonderful world waiting out there for you. And we need you, but we need you clear-eyed and clear-minded. But we do need you, and we want you. And I am very, very proud of all of you. And just stay with it. And I love you, all of you. And to the parents, I know how hard it is for you. I don't think that there's any, see, I'm having trouble. If there's any hurt, like the hurt that a child can give a parent.
It's a weird.
It's a very special, a special hurt. And it's a special relationship, obviously. And I know how hard it is for you. And I know how hard it is for you to see your children maybe sometimes take a backward step where you hope that they would make a forward step. But if you just hang in there with them, I know they'll make it. I know they will. And I know that we'll beat this. We have to.
That was the weakest speech I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Seemed like she just made that up on the spot.
But of course, Straight Inc. spurred numerous abuse allegations and lawsuits throughout its lifetime. By the time the program finally closed in 1993, at least $15 million in lawsuits were paid out to victims and their families. Like most closed programs, former participants spun it into the Kids Center. Although this program closed in the early 2000s, it was spun into 3 additional operating programs. However, the political connections to the troubled teen industry don't end with the Reagans. No, they certainly do not. Because when George W. Bush was governor of Texas, he publicly supported Teen Challenge, the program that Emma Burris attended. As governor, Bush stripped away legislation allowing no government oversight of faith-based organizations. Then, as president, Bush made numerous appearances at Teen Challenge locations praising the program. Here's a clip of Bush talking about some of the success stories that have come out of Teen Challenge.
Matt was addicted to drugs. He had spent time because of robbery. He was lost, and then he was found by people at Teen Challenge. He is now going to college. Where are you, Matt?
There he is.
Where's Arthur? Pastor. Pastor, stand up. Yeah, there you go. You get your patcher, Matt. There he is. So Matt now goes to the Connecticut Culinary Institute. If you're looking for a cook, he's your man. Here's what he said. The best thing about, speaking about Teen Challenge, is the love that's in the program. I had no idea what I wanted to do at all. This let me know what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. See, government can pass law and it can hand out money, but cannot love.
Now, unfortunately, Teen Challenge still exists under a much lower profile. Programs are still operated nationwide, and their methods haven't changed. But more than any other public figure, history's greatest monster, Dr. Phil McGraw, is responsible for the explosion in popularity of the troubled teen industry during the early 2000s. Dr. Phil has not only publicly supported numerous abusive teen programs, but he's personally sent dozens of kids straight from his set to these programs. And it worked like this. Dr. Phil would be contacted by a parent who claimed to have a troubled teen. Dr. Phil's producer and he himself would then convince the parent that not only was it a good idea to publicly shame their child on national television, but that sending them off to one of his affiliated program would be the best solution. Hannah Archuleta, who appeared on the Dr. Phil show and was forced to go to Turnabout Ranch, sued Dr. Phil in 2021 for the sexual assault that she experienced while in the program.
So when Hannah was 17, she was struggling with suicidal ideation. Her family reached out to Dr. Phil as they viewed him as, quote, qualified and capable of helping people in distress. The producers agreed, but told the family that they were never allowed to bring up suicide while on the show and said it was too great of a liability. The morning before the show taped, Dr. Phil invited Hannah's father into his office for a private conversation. He told Hannah's father that the best solution for her was to send her to Turnabout Ranch immediately after they finished taping. He already had paperwork ready to sign. Dr. Phil had kidnappers on his staff and had already arranged for transport for Hannah even before he talked to her father. Dr. Phil told her father that he had, quote, PhD in wimping out and needed to have the courage to win just this once. He told Hannah's father that the show would not only finance her stay, but also personally oversee her treatment. This is a claim that Dr. Phil refuted, as he said that he had no control once the child left his studio. Dr. Phil finally manipulated Hannah's father by saying that her mother, who is terminally ill, said that this was her dying wish. After the show finished taping, Hannah's father was forced into a room and told to sign paperwork he didn't have time to read. Kidnappers rushed to Hannah and her mother had a panic attack. The family had no idea of the abuse that Turnabout subjected its children to. As previously mentioned, one participant killed 2 staff members while trying to escape. Bad Baby, who was made famous by her appearance on the Dr. Phil show, the Catch Me Outside girl, if you don't know, also said she was subjected to numerous abuses and manual labor while at the ranch. Let's hear a little bit from Miss Danielle Bergoli here.
If you have to do 25 piles, you're really doing like 50 wheelbarrows. So while I was there, just a lot of crazy things happened. I seen a kid get held down for trying to leave. Just honestly, I don't think he was trying to run away. I think he was just trying to like walk out the door and just like get some time to himself, and they restrained him. They held him down. They had no problem holding kids down, which is against the law. You're not supposed to touch the kids, but they had no problem doing that. It's just our word against the staff's word when you're there, because there's no witnesses, there's no cameras, you don't have a phone, there's none of that. That's why I was always so scared to speak out, because it's like no one's gonna believe me. A lot of things that like happened to me there, it hurt me so bad because I was genuinely like confused. I'm writing letters to my mom like, Mom, I will do anything. Like, you don't understand what this place is like. Like, you can't do this to me. Like, I will do anything. I will do therapy every day. Like, I will go through an outpatient program, all that. Like, just please let me come home.
So sad.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. We'll have links for all of these clips for the full videos if you're interested in hearing the rest of their stories, because it's definitely worth listening to. A week and a half after Hannah arrived at Turnabout, an adult male staff member sexually assaulted her while they were alone in the kitchen. Hannah, again, was 17 at the time. When she attempted to report the crime to the managers of the program, they told her she was lying and gave her manual labor as punishment. The Dr. Phil show claimed that they had no contact with the programs once the child arrived from his show, but again, he told Hannah's father that he would personally oversee her treatment. Numerous other victims claimed that Dr. Phil not only received reports on exactly what was happening, but he also received payment from the abusive programs, which this would make sense, as even if a child refused treatment, Dr. Phil would use his kidnappers to make sure they attended the programs. Here's a clip of a young man named Gabe getting kidnapped from his house on the Dr. Phil show. Warning, some might find this kind of disturbing.
Oh, yeah, I forgot we do have this clip.
We are en route to Gabe's home. You think he's gonna freak on me?
I think he's gonna be kind of like groggy sleeping.
Get in quick, light on fast. Okay, let's go.
Oh, great TV. Listen to music.
Gabe, good morning. Today's the day for the ranch,
You're
bro.
gonna go to the wilderness camp.
What you doing, bro?
The cops are outside. We're going.
Why? What are you
want
talking
them to
about?
go?
Why later?
Nah, I'm not going, bro.
Please.
You already know, bro. You've done this before.
We're leaving right now. Can I ask for
Hey,
your
bro!
cooperation?
I'm not leaving, bro.
We're gonna ask for your cooperation,
Nah,
okay?
bro, I'm not leaving.
So, Gabe, if you don't comply, you're resisting. If you resist, you end up in restraints.
Nah,
Okay, can you please stand up? I need to put you in restraints.
so watch out. Tell these fools to get the out of my face.
You're going.
What the is your problem, bro?
One more second, man, to not comply, and then it's on. Dude,
Get the out of here, homie.
dude, stop it. Hey, knock it off.
Chill.
Tony, let's lay him down.
Stop resisting, Gabe. Bro,
We're gonna be there when needs help.
Hey, bro. Come on, hey, I'm joking, bro. I'm gonna die, bro. Please turn me over.
Yes, stop resisting.
Give me up, bro. My gloves are too tight.
Turn it. We'll loosen him in a minute.
Arms. Oh, what's up, bro? I'm not going nowhere, bro. I'm sleeping. Why you guys pull me on my
Tone.
outside? Going nowhere, bro. Bro, let me go. You can't drag me in the car. Get the up. Hey, bro. Bro.
Shut the doors. Let's go, people.
Cat.
I was hoping it wouldn't go down that way, but in the back of my head, I knew it was going to.
He was gonna resist. It's emotionally upsetting, to see him in that state. Ever since he was 11 and first started getting in trouble, it's like we've always thought, like, if all else fails, we'll call the Dr. Phil show and, like, oh my God, somebody please help us. And it's like, I can't believe that this is actually happening. But I hope this is for the greater good and, we can really get some help.
But right now, I feel relief. Like absolute relief.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, Dr. Phil. Like, I pray this works. I pray this works.
If all else fails, let's take him to the Dr. Phil show. We'll call the Dr. Phil show. Well, as if this isn't traumatic enough, let's air it on national television.
Yeah, this poor guy.
Excellent work.
So he ended up going to Wingate, which is a troubled teen program. It was closed 9 months ago after hundreds of abuse allegations were leveled at the program. And despite this program being closed, Dr. Phil still has its dormant website listed on his show's website for treatment resources.
He's 100% getting paid, in my opinion.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
He's like an affiliate for all these
has
places.
to be, right?
Oh, yeah,
He
totally.
has to be.
Dr. Phil's influence included the kids he would personally send to the programs and the children whose parents were manipulated after watching his show. Because, of course, other parents are going to watch what you just saw and be like, oh, this is great. This is what we need. A Reddit thread about Dr. Phil's influence on the troubled teen industry has dozens of posts from victims whose parents sent their kids to Dr. Phil affiliated programs after watching his show. Here's one of those testimonies. Quote, my family found out about the Turnabout Ranch through Dr. Phil in 2012 and decided to send me there at 13 after multiple short stay inpatients. I was actually inpatient at the time when I was gooned and driven 12 hours to Utah. The staff told me that my mom was out front, and when I got out there, they put me into an SUV with no inside door handles and the windows only cracked about 2 inches. My mom walked up to the window and told me goodbye. I spent Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas at the Turnabout Ranch and was discharged sometime in February. I was so young and so medicated at the time, I don't remember much of my time there, to be honest, but it was scary. I was the youngest person there, and everyone seemed to be especially mean to me for that reason. It was extremely isolating. I'm 23 now and have nightmares regularly about it, and to this day, I can't be around a campfire. I have such a hatred in my heart for Dr. Phil. And Turnabout Ranch still operates to this day. You go visit their website, and it's still publicly supported by Dr. Phil. But aside from the manipulation, Dr. Phil and other high-profile celebs put parents and teens through, the websites and brochures of the programs themselves present a very different picture of the kind of treatment they put children through.
Yeah, let's take a look at this Turnabout Ranch website. What does the beginning say? Real ranch, real values, real change. Yeah, it looks nice, right? Horseback riding. You think summer camp, connecting with nature.
Talk to a specialist. There's a button.
Academics. Get more info.
Ranch life.
Yeah, I can see how parents would be very tricked into this. You would think that once you get to the conversation of, yeah, in order to get your kid there, we're going to kidnap them in the middle of the night. That would be your big red flag, right?
Look at all the pictures.
Oh, how nice. Look, they look so happy. Planting flowers, being with animals. Oh, milking a cow.
I mean, I can see how this would be therapeutic.
Yes, if this was actually what it was like.
Minus all the other stuff.
Right. Anyway, Turnabout Ranch is the same program that Hannah Archuleta and Bad Baby attended after the Dr. Phil show. The ranch says that its program combines therapy, academics, and hard work to impact lasting and powerful change in teens. They claim to have numerous accredited medical professionals on staff and make no mention of the multiple allegations against them. Of course not. Their philosophy can be summed up in 6 words, the ones I just read from the website: real ranch, real values, real change. Doctors and therapists recommend them to help young people to get their lives back on track.
They have a YouTube page that I was just looking at, and there's so many. It's like Beth's story, Andrew's story, or testimony or whatever. And they're like, yeah, I don't know. I guess some people have a positive experience, unless they're like being paid to do it or forced. But they talk about, oh yeah, I was getting in a lot of trouble beforehand, but this totally changed my life. And I've learned to take responsibility for my actions and blah, blah, blah. So,
well, I'm sure a lot of those are really those people's experiences. And there are people, we've seen in other documentaries as well, talking about how this was good for them in their eyes. Now, whether or not they were, tortured and brainwashed into saying that, really, whether or not they recognize that.
I was going to say, do you think every single person that goes into these programs is having a terrible experience? Like,
I don't
or
know.
are there people that are
Can't
actually
speak for
being
everybody.
changed for the better?
There could be.
I'm sure
I don't
there's
know.
some people who have had a positive experience.
And of
'Cause
course,
to
they're
be
going to
fair-
get those experiences and advertise them.
Yeah, but also just like if you go read through people's experiences in the Troubled Teen Reddit, like there are a number of stories of people who had very positive experiences and didn't experience any of the things that other people did.
But is it the vast
And-
majority?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to say, right? Like, how do you quantify that? But
The fact that there's enough to make an episode on this is
right,
the
is
red
a problem.
flag itself.
True. Yeah, very
It'd be
true.
like, oh, one-off people. Sometimes there's a bad experience. There's clearly a ton.
Yeah. And just like the core values of this program and their practices are problematic overall, whether or not your experience was good. But as previously mentioned, things are getting better. Laws have been enacted in California, Montana, and Oregon, including making these programs no longer for-profit programs and regulating the secure transport kidnapping operation. Utah, the industry's epicenter, passed laws in 2021 to attempt to regulate it finally. The laws ban chemical sedation and mechanical restraints unless authorized by the Utah Office of Licensing. Programs now must allow children to have unmonitored communication with their families, and the government must conduct more frequent inspections as well. However, it does not ban or reduce the practices or punishments of these programs. Manual labor, attack therapy, sleep deprivation, and isolation are still technically allowed. Efforts to pass federal legislation have failed yearly due to the political power the troubled teen industry still enjoys. This all comes after a 2007 Government Accountability Office report detailed various abuse and neglect, and even reported on the deaths of children while attending these programs. Politicians know what is happening at these programs and still refuse to do anything about them. Unsilenced and Breaking Code Silence are 2 fantastic organizations that push for federal regulation. They spread survivors' stories and archive various programs and their abuses. Caroline Cole, who runs Unsilenced, said, quote, "We've got to stop pathologizing being a teen." Still, hundreds of abusive programs are being operated across the nation. As previously mentioned, anywhere from 120,000 to 200,000 children are in these programs at any given moment. Most of the country, the practices remain the same. And in February of this year, a 12-year-old boy actually died on his first day at Trails Wilderness Camp in North Carolina. He had been, quote, loud and irate when he arrived and refused to eat dinner. And this is all according to counselors, by the way. And apparently he had a panic attack just after midnight. Counselors didn't say how they handled it, but based on other testimonies, we do know how other camps have handled panic attacks through violence. The boy was found at 7:45 a.m. the following day, unresponsive, with his pants and underwear lying next to his shoulder. The camp said that his death was accidental, and the sheriff's office said that there was no evidence of criminal conduct or suspicious acts, and the boy likely suffocated. Trails, North Carolina had its license revoked and was briefly shut down, but it seems a new wilderness camp has opened on its property. Like all the others, when one program shuts down, it spins off to another. According to some reports, 157 students and participants have died while in the troubled teen industry since 1970. This number comes from 2013 and undoubtedly has increased.
Yeah, that's really scary to think about. It's just there's no oversight, no regulation for programs that are getting very close, or in some cases worse than what prisoners deal with.
In a lot of cases, yeah.
So, yeah, it's just, I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry at this point. So there's a lot of money being made in the troubled teens world.
And you wonder how many of those politicians are benefiting from it or utilizing these camps.
Yeah, I'm sure they're receiving payments.
Probably. Allegedly, in our opinion. But anyway.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's lobbying going on for sure to keep this stuff open and unregulated the way that it's been for so long.
Well, we definitely want to hear from all of you on this one, you know, your thoughts on everything, but definitely from those of you out there who may have firsthand experience with these programs. We definitely want to hear your opinions, your experiences, or, you know, your loved one stories who may have went, or friends and family who have been there. I just cannot imagine. I am so grateful that I've never been exposed to anything like this, and that I will never put my own child into something like this. I cannot imagine the trauma and PTSD that would follow you the rest of your life. It's so horrific.
Yeah, it just seems like they're not set up to really help anybody. That it's there to profit off of the expense of the youth and their trauma and
their parents, and
right, and
torture them
and brainwash parents into thinking they're actually helping. But then it's like, what happens when these kids leave these places? Are they actually reformed? Are they actually on the right path? Maybe there's some, but it seems like a vast majority are worse off than they were before they went into these programs. So it's like, literally, there's no point whatsoever. It's profits over people per usual.
Yep.
Just wonder if that will ever stop. Full start, actually, because it's like, clearly we need programs, we need places, treatment centers for kids that go through trauma, that are dealing with addiction, or, you know, need help mentally. I mean, there's a lot of mental illness and just a lack of resources. So it's like, who do you trust? Who can you trust anymore to help your kids? Certainly not Dr. Phil, as I think we showed today. Anybody on TV is the last person you should be seeking help from.
Well, that's going to be it for us this week, guys. Let us know your thoughts. As always, we'll be back next week. But until then, keep on taking your mind a mile higher.